Welcome to Manchester Metropolitan University's Subject Mentor Training for Block B. You're a variety of different schools direct and core trainees in here, so we're going to be talking about how to take a trainee for Block B. On the website there is Block A training, so we presume that everyone who's here today is just for Block B. Mentoring. Thank you so much for being a mentor for a trainee teacher here at MMU, and this is what mentoring is actually about. It might be the first time you've been a mentor, you might be an experienced mentor and you might need a bit of a refreshment, or you've come because later on you're going to be in subject areas discussing subject-based issues to do with mentoring. But Jane and I, my name's Karen Duffy, I'm Head of Secondary Partnerships here. I've got Jane Martindale, who's the Assistant Head of Partnerships here, and my colleagues in various subjects will be speaking to you after this session about what happens in subject area. Everything we're going to discuss today will be on the Partnership website. In your package there you've got with you, you've got the website details and a screenshot of what our website looks like. If there's anything that you can't find on the website, please can you get in touch with us ASAP through Bev Ingham. Bev's our admissions person, our placements person, who will be able to deal with any issues that people have. Training videos are on there. All the paperwork that you could possibly need is on the website. But as I said, if there's anything that's not on the website, please can you get in touch with us ASAP and we'll make sure that the information's out there for you. It's a very easy, accessible website. There's no password that you need. You just go through the Manchester Met University's main website page and you'll come to Partnership Resources. But the website address is in the package that you have there in the PowerPoint. You'll get 2 copies of the calendar in front of you. You've got a core calendar and you also have a Schools Direct calendar. I'll just look at the core calendar for the purpose of just this next 5 minutes, just to explain where the students have been so far on their journey. So students will be coming to you on Monday the 22nd of January, and they're with you until Thursday. They're with you for 4 days. They're back here at university next week on the 26th. They'll have passed their first teaching practice. So all the trainees that are with you will be they'll have passed their first experience, so they've passed the basics of the teaching standards. They'll have had some days in primary school possibly, or some students might have had some post-16 experience. Some students will be doing that during the enrichment phase, but they've had 2 weeks here at university roughly, where we've given them some extra information to develop their skills, to build on what they've already done in their first teaching practice. So they're coming to you for 4 days next week, and then they're on placement with you Monday to Friday. And this is different from their first teaching practice where they've been back here at universities on a Friday. They're with you Monday to Friday. And I'll talk about timetabling with them, but they'll be doing up to a 60% timetable. And that's 60% of the school's timetable, not your timetable. Because if you have remission for PPA time for being a head of department or being in charge of a particular aspect of teaching, it's not your timetable, it's the whole school's timetable. So up to 60%, but don't feel it has to be, you have to get every single lesson there up to the 60%. We say up to 60%. And I'll explain what that means later on. There are a couple of days where they'll be back here at university, and that's the white days on the calendar. But for the majority of time until May, they'll be with you in schools. Easter holidays are different for everybody, so if you see the Easter holidays aren't your Easter holidays on the calendar, because different schools, different LEAs have different holidays in Easter, don't worry about that in half terms. Students will all experience holidays of the same length and different places will experience holidays. So don't worry about when they are. Students have to do 120 days to get a PGCE course, and we will work out how many days they've actually done. So don't worry about differences in holidays. There's a couple of days at the end of the May period that are hatched in on the calendar. Those 2 days there are where students are in school, but they are working on their curriculum development assignments. They're working on their written assignments and any other tasks that they have. So they'll be off timetable, but physically they have to be in school because it's part of their 120 days. A little bit different than Schools Direct. In there's different alliances have different models. We have 3 different models for Schools Direct. This is what we call an AB model, which is where students... How many people in here for Schools Direct? Nobody's Schools Direct. Oh, a couple of people on this table here. So Schools Direct, we have a variety of different models. This is what we call an AB model, which is very similar to the core. We have ABA model, which is where they'll be going back to you back to their original school on the first back to their original teaching practice on their first placement. So people for Schools Direct, we can explain that. There's only a few of you. We'll explain that to you in the sessions afterwards. So students arriving with you on Monday. The professional mentor in your school will have developed a programme for those people on that first day. So please speak to the professional mentor to make sure the PM has actually got a programme in place. Now, as part of that programme that will be in place, we would like you to meet the trainees on the first day as their subject mentor so they know who you are. If the PM has not built it into the programme, at least for 5 minutes at lunchtime, make sure that you've actually met the trainees so they feel comfortable and engaged in the department. And it's really important that we say here, establish a rapport with the student, a common sense of purpose, and an understanding of expectations. That's really important. It's important from day one that the students understand what expectations they actually have of the programme and yourselves as a department. Most people develop a day that looks something like this. They'll be having an introduction to the school, the context of the school. We ask students to read up on the Ofsted report beforehand and any information they can find about the school, so they've got a contextual analysis of what kind of students you have at the school, what subjects are taught, and they understand the needs of the area and the needs of the young people they're actually delivering to. They might want to observe, as part of the Professional Mentors programme, different practitioners in different areas. They might be observing your own particular area. They might be doing a pupil trail where they follow a pupil round so they've got the ideas of what happens in the school. They'll be meeting the main important people in the school, the most important person in the school, which is obviously the person who does the photocopying, because that person's the person they'll be desperately wanting to get to meet. So they'll be visiting a variety of different departments, different people during those couple of days. They'll be spending some time with you, perhaps not on the first day, but in the 3 days they'll be spending time with you as well. One of the things that you'll be doing with them is developing their timetable with the student teacher themselves. The professional, you might have started to develop this already based on what's their TIF form, which is their teacher information form. So you understand what degree background they have, what their strengths are, what their A-level subjects are. And you'll have been sent this week, because I know that Bev Ingham has sent them out this week, their Review 2Bs. So what their information is from their first teaching practice. That's been sent to the professional mentors. We're still, if you haven't got that information, chase up with your professional mentor where the information is. But we are still chasing up a number of Review 2Bs from their first teaching practice. So if your professional mentor contacts Bev and says, where's the 2B, it could be that we're still waiting for it from their first teaching practice. So, and if you're in a school that had a Block A student and it's not been done, if you can chase your own PM to pass it on, that'd be really helpful. So read where the student's up to so far on their journey before they come to you on Monday. They'll also come with their subject knowledge audit. Students have these electronically these days. They have what's called an RPD, which is a record of professional development, and they keep that electronically. So get to see their RPD. They have been asked to update their subject knowledge audit, and they'll definitely have been updating that before they come to you on practice. Just so you know what they've done on the first teaching practice and what they could do with developing on their teaching practice with yourselves. One of the things I think is really important to do is to develop professionalism as well. Will you just make sure, and the professional mentor will make sure with this as well, they understand the expectations of the department. Give them a reminder about social media, anything that, any rules and regulations the school has on safeguarding. It's always a good idea to hear this message from yourselves as subject mentors. The professional mentor will have expressed this to them. Expectations in times of when to be at school, where to have lunch, things that the cans and the can'ts of being a teacher, and professionalism, teaching standards part 2. Make sure that you reiterate those with the students as well. One thing that they will need to know is where resources are kept in the department, and schemes of work. That's really important that students see schemes of work the department have, and any resources that you have that you would like the students to use as well. Okay, so what is your job then? Your job as being a subject mentor. So you're going to be engaging with the progress indicators. You're going to be measuring where students are at in their journey. All trainee teachers have to be either good or outstanding at review 6, which is the last part of the teaching phase, which is back here with us at the university. But we would ask that students are making the journey from requires improvement to good, outstanding with you, and Jane's going to express that to you later on. And that you help them with that journey. You're developing their subject knowledge. You're enabling them to develop their skills as being a practitioner in your own particular subject areas. And any gaps in their knowledge, you're assisting them to be able to achieve where those gaps are, and flag posting them to how to achieve those gaps in their knowledge. We've set up to 60% timetable, and if we look back at the calendar, we often have questions from schools where they say, when should they be doing this 60% timetable, at what point? And we don't specify a particular time on that at the university. We just say that we expect gradualism, because students will have been on different journeys during their teaching career. Some people will have been classroom teaching assistants, cover supervisors, and they might be a little bit more used to and familiar with a school setting than somebody who's just come straight from HE. It might be that some people are itching to get into teaching quite quickly, and some people might need to do some more observations before they start on their up to 60% timetable. But please, will you develop a programme of gradualism with the students? I would imagine that in the first 2 weeks that they are doing some starters and some plenaries, and perhaps teaching 1 or 2 classes, but please negotiate that with the students. And their own gradualism, where they're up to on their journey. We don't have a specific time where we say, you've got to be teaching the 60% now, but you'll be able to discuss that with the trainee and work out on their journey at what point can they get to the 60% timetable. They have come to you as well with a review 3 here from university, where they've looked at the things that they think they need to develop in their teaching practice. They all know where they're coming to you. We told them this week where they're coming on placement, so they're familiar with which schools they're coming to as well. Some schools, some professional mentors have written to the students already to tell them the expectations of the first day. And it might be in the next couple of days that students are beginning to phone you as well to say, what time do you want me there on the first day? If it's a split site school, where would you like me to be? Which building would you like to be in? What time, etc., etc. So if you haven't had the professional mentor hasn't had the conversation with the student so far, please you have that conversation with the student about what time they're expected to be there. You'll be having a review 4 with the students the second week after half term, so the beginning of March. This is the point where we need to know whether students are making progression. So they'll have had up to their 60% timetable at this point, so you can actually make an adequate assessment whether they're actually at this part of the journey or not. If they are having problems, by this point at review 4, Jane will explain to you what we do. Students should be RI at this point at least. If they're not, Jane will express to you the at risk of failure documentation. But students should be RI at this point at least. And Jane will explain to you in a minute, if students are at RI, we need to get them to good by the end of the placement. And we have a procedure that you follow of how to get students from requires improvement to good. And there are a number of students who are thinking with an extra bit of a push and some more target setting can get from good to outstanding. So we have procedures in place for getting students to those processes. You will be doing one observed lesson a week that's formalised. You might observe more than one lesson a week, but there's only one that's done on the formal documentation that I think you have a copy of the lesson observation in front of you. So it's a carbonated document. The students will come with carbonated documents, but a lot of students these days, and a lot of professional mentors and subject mentors, will have lesson observations on electronic versions. So please will you make sure that you use either electronic or you use the carbonated copies of the lesson observation sheets, but you keep an accurate record of all the formalised observations that you do. On the website there's some examples of lesson observations that have been done and some good practice on there that's actually happened so far. We will observe them from university once, and we will tell you when we're coming to do an observation with you, and we would expect to do a joint observation. And when we come to observe with you, when we do the joint observation, what we will do is we will observe you feeding back to the student, and then when the student's not around, we will discuss the observation with you for your development, because we need to quality assure whether we're both singing the same message. Also, we need you to have mentor training, and there's 3 processes that we need for you to get certification for mentoring training. You've got to do a joint observation with a university tutor. You've got to have attended this session, which is why we've logged it on our records that you've attended this session, and you've got to have developed a review process, which we will be talking to you about the development of that. And then Bev will put you on the database and you will receive a certificate to say that you're a trained MMU mentor. We have a really good working relationship with the University of Manchester, and we have a Manchester model where we both accept each other's training. So if you've done the training here with MMU, Manchester will accept it, and vice versa. So you are a trained Manchester mentor. Yeah, so we can work between us. Jane will talk about the remediation, the AROF process. We also ask you if you can support the students with their written assignments. If they ask you information about the written assignments, they might ask you about, how do you think I could develop the teaching in that for my written assignment? You can talk them through those kind of things. But also, you might be their first point of call for their references when they're applying for jobs. So this teaching practice, it'd be really helpful if you could assist them when they're applying for jobs, and also make sure that if they want to use you for a referee, that you write a reference for them that they can use for job applications. The last thing is, you have a weekly mentor meeting with the students as well. and I'll explain the weekly mentor meeting. So 2 really crucial, important points: 1 formal observation a week and 1 weekly mentor meeting, which I'll explain to you in a minute. You'll be contributing to reviews for 5A and 5B for Schools Direct, or 4 and 5 for core trainees. So we've said 1 a week, lesson observations, formalised. Every school is very different on this and adhere to the school's policy on this. We don't have any formalised information to schools to say that you have to physically be in the room with students, unless it's a practical subject or it's a subject that students might need help with in terms of PE or design technology, or any subject area that you think it's pertinent to be in the classroom all the time with the students for health and safety issues. Some student teachers are left in the classroom if they're teaching a class that you don't have a concern with, and you've seen them teaching and you realise that the student will be able to cope with the students. As long as you tell them, I'm going to be next door in the workroom doing some work, or I'm going to be in the staff room, please can you contact us? But please make sure your professional mentor is okay with that, because we don't want to get, we don't want these student teachers on their own in a room if it's not the school's policy to actually do that. If you are observing, if you're in the lesson all the time with the student teacher, you don't have to do a formal lesson, a formal observation every time. Some people constantly take notes on the student teacher, and it can be quite disturbing for student teachers to have every time they teach to have lessons observed and feedback be given. We ask you just to do that once in the formal observation forms. You'll be having weekly mentor meetings with the students. They bring with them the weekly mentor meeting pro forma already completed, so the task is on the student to do that. And one of the things we ask you to do is keep a copy of any of the notes that are made from the weekly mentor meeting. If we get to the rare situation where students are not doing well, we need to keep a record of everything that's happened, weekly observations, weekly mentor meetings, and we expect you to keep an up-to-date file, which often the professional mentor will look at, just to make sure that you're actually doing those tasks with you as part of the process. Please, and this is sometimes it's a difficult conversation, this, engage with critical reflection with the students. Sometimes it can be very difficult to actually be critically reflective with students. Some students take it quite personally. So have difficult conversations, because students need to develop, they need to stretch themselves, they need to hone in on their teaching skills. But have a caution with how you actually discuss those issues with students. But don't be afraid of having difficult conversations. If you have a student that doesn't accept what you tell them about their teaching, because sometimes we don't see our own development, and sometimes it takes somebody else to have that conversation with them. Ask the professional mentor as well to be involved in that process if students are finding the critical advice that you give them challenging. But try not to be too critical with students, because often they find it quite deflating, and they'll contact us at university if the subject mentor has given them 18 different targets for one lesson and just one strength. So try and be as positive as you possibly can when students are actually teaching, particularly in the first stages of the teaching practice with you. Make sure you comment on the teaching and learning, and very important to comment on impact on pupil progression. We ask you to reflect on this in the lesson observation pro forma, so make sure that you allow students to understand what impact on pupil progression actually means. Sometimes it's easier to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of what happened in lessons, asking questions. A lot of people don't find it helpful to them when you just put 905 students did X, 9010 students did Y. Sometimes people ask the questions, why did it help? So a lot of questioning skills in there in the lesson observations is often more helpful than just a list of what happened during the lesson in terms of chronological sequences of the lesson. Make sure you're not afraid to have those difficult conversations as well. And if you are struggling to have a difficult conversation with a student, please contact the university tutors here, and we can come and do an early joint observation so we can have the difficult conversation as well with a student if you need to have somebody else to assist you with there as well. Make sure the professional mentor is also engaged in that process. Top tips on observing lessons. There's some good examples of lessons that have been observed that mentors from schools have actually filled in that are on the partnership website. Please have a look through some of those to see if there's anything that you would find useful when you're observing lessons in there. If you give students suggestions for development, please make sure that those suggestions are very, very simple so the students know how to achieve them. Sometimes if mentors write down things like develop your behaviour management, it's difficult because it's not a SMART target, it's difficult to actually achieve it. So make sure they're very specific targets that students could actually implement and work on when they're actually in teaching practice with you. Make sure that they know a time scale as well. For example, by next week's lesson with that particular class, you have done X, Y and Z. So they've got a time scale, the targets are achievable and they're clear and understandable targets. As I've said to you, we'll be coming to do a joint observation with you. We'll give you plenty of notice about the joint observation. We'll observe you feeding back to the trainee. And if there's any training that you need during that discussion with the university tutor, please discuss that with the university tutor. If there's anything that you don't understand while the university tutor's there, that you actually use that opportunity for yourselves to develop your own mentoring skills as well. In the weekly mentor meetings that you will have with the student, they'll come with a pro forma. You're going to be looking at a variety of different tasks with them. You'll be looking at the progress indicators, which Jane will talk about in a second. You can give them some targets that are associated with their professionalism, with their development of subject knowledge, with their teaching, with pastoral issues, any issues they come to see you that are surrounding the area of teaching, they will discuss in the weekly mentor meetings with you. We ask you to have an hour with the students, but we recognise that it's difficult sometimes to have an hour with the students. A lot of schools wouldn't have that, so you could have half an hour at lunchtime, half an hour preschool, so you could fill in an hour's worth of time. It might not necessarily be an hour of time during the school day, but try and fit it in where you can with the students and have those on a weekly basis. So the students have that weekly mentor meeting in their file and you have a copy of it to say that actually this mentor meeting did happen and that you were developing the students' progression along their journey as well. Just to remind yourselves as well that some schools often, I know that we're not these days, but some schools still insist on Ofsted grading each lesson that trainee teachers do. So please make sure that you're not Ofsted grading any student teachers' lessons there as well. And just a reminder as well that students aren't to be doing cover during the school day. We remind professional mentors about that, but we also remind you about that. Make sure that the student brings the completed weekly lesson meeting with them and you're just assisting them with it. It's not the responsibility of the subject mentor to fill that document in. It's a reflection document that we ask the students to actually do and that you will work on that with them and you sign that off when both of you are happy with what's been written down there as well. I'll hand over to Jane.
Okay, I'll keep this bit relatively brief because Karen has actually mentioned quite a few things already and I'm just mindful of the time with this as well. The progress indicators, they quite often only get used at the review points, at review 2 and then at review 5. And it's a real shame that the trainees don't get a chance to really track their progress at other times. So we would really encourage you, every time you have a mentor meeting, because in reality there's not that many mentor meetings across a block, that you refer to these and help the trainees see exactly how they can be making that progress. Because they have to make progress relatively quickly, really, and you need to help them understand what it is that they need to do to move along through each stage. So the standards, all the standards are included in the progress indicators, and then we've got statements underneath each of the categories of unsatisfactory, requires improvement, good and outstanding. And at the review points, the trainees should be highlighting where they think they are, and then you also have a copy and highlight where you think they are, and then come together and compare notes. Hopefully you are in complete agreement, but sometimes they might be over or underestimating their own ability and need a little bit of guidance as to where they do actually fall on onto the grid. This has been highlighted here, and this one has been done where a trainee, this was their review 2, and then at a further meeting they've shown that they've put it in a different colour to show that they've actually made progress there. So please try not to only be looking at these review points. Please try to look at them, if possible, every mentor meeting, and if not really every other mentor meeting, you should be referring to them. Right. I'm just going to go out of this and have a look at the reviews themselves. Okay. The review documents, for those of you who have mentored MMU trainees before, you will be aware that we had 6 different review documents. And what we've tried to do with them this year is to put them all together in one Excel spreadsheet, in the hope that it will keep them all in one place and show continuity through the review process. This is the first time that we've used it this year, so we have had some teething problems, and we are aware of those, and we're trying to work through those. But by now, hopefully, most of the trainees will know what they're doing with this and will have overcome any little problems that they might have had. So they are going to come to you with a review document that will have an overall progress page here, where they will have grades against the progress indicators for review 2A and review 2B. So you'll be able to see where they fell in the RI, good, maybe outstanding, possibly not though at the end of Block A. And hopefully if there were any areas that they were at risk, then those will have been addressed during Block A. So they will come to you with that. And what I'm looking at here is I'm just going to look at the reviews that the reviews that will come to you. So for each of the standards, the trainees will have, I'll just make that a little bit smaller actually. The trainees will have highlighted where they're up to, okay, and the mentors will also have highlighted that. And then they will have filled in, the trainees will have filled in an interim review comment, and then there will be a final review comment for each of the standards, and there will be interim grades and final grades, and then the subject mentor from Block A will have filled in this part, and there may possibly also be a comment from the professional mentor as well. So that is your key bit of information that they're going to come to you with. For each of the standards, there will be the trainee's view of where they're up to, there will be the subject mentor's review of where they're up to, and then there will be some comments, some final comments from the professional mentor as well. And so that's your key bit of information about where the trainees are up to. They will also fill in a review 3, which is mostly going to be about them taking targets from review 2, review 2B, and then considering what work they've done during their consolidation phase. And together, you and the trainee will make some comments at the very outset of Block B about how those targets are going to be addressed initially. Okay. The next one for you though, and the key points of checking. The next one is review 4. And as Karen said, review 4 is really the checkpoint for making sure that the trainees are on track to be passing the block. If you have any doubt at review 4 that they're going to be making sufficient progress to pass overall, then that should ring alarm bells, and that should be the point where you get the university tutor involved and the professional mentor at the school involved. If you're new to subject mentoring and you're not sure, because quite often people aren't sure whether their trainee is doing all right, so I'd strongly advise you to get the professional mentor in at that point if you've got doubts, and get them to do a joint observation with you. Another good way sometimes of judging whether your trainee is all right or doing all right or not is if you've got another trainee in the school and that subject mentor says they're doing that, they're up to where we would expect them to be at this point in the game, go and just observe them, and sometimes that can help you make a judgment about how well your trainee is doing. But at that point, if you've got any doubts that they're not going to be passing, you must start getting the wheels in motion for the remediation process, and I'll come back to that in a minute. The other thing that you need to be thinking about at that point is, are they looking like they are just RI, just requires improvement, in which case there are procedures that we put into place to move them on, because we want them all to be finishing as good or outstanding. Are they looking like they're going to finish as good, but we've still got quite a way to go in the placement and they've got the potential to be outstanding, in which case there are procedures that we put in place at that point as well. Okay, so review 4 is a real key point for actually moving the trainees on, and they either start going into the at risk of failure procedure, or they start moving into the RI to good procedure, or they start moving from the good to outstanding procedure. And there is, as always, there is some paperwork that goes hand in hand with that process, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Review 4 and 5, a little bit like review 2A and 2B, are on the same page. So review 4 is your checkpoint, and review 5 is your final point, whether it's school direct and you do a review 5A and then a review 5B, or if it's core, you just do a review 5. Review 5 is what you do at the very towards the end of the block, and that's where you are deciding where the trainee is finishing at that particular point. There should be no surprises at that point. You shouldn't then be thinking, I'm going to put a cross in the box that says fail at that point, because if any trainees are in that position where you think they're not going to actually pass the block, then we should have gone through the AROF procedures before then. Okay. What I would say with the anything to do with the AROF procedures is that you do actually make sure that the professional mentor is fully aware of the process. Okay. Please don't just put remediation into the process without any consultation with the university or the professional mentor. It has got to be a joint process, so we need to make sure that that happens. Okay, so just going back to the progress indicators, if you make sure that you familiarise yourself with them, if you're not particularly familiar with them, so that you are able to interpret when your trainee says to you, so what do I need to do for standard 1 to get from RI to good? I can see words in front of me and there's 2 statements, but I don't really know what it is I need to do, that you are able to interpret and unpick that for them, because they need something concrete that you can advise them to do. They need smart targets to use to help them to actually make that progress. So do use them regularly. Do use them at your mentor meetings on a weekly basis. Don't let it just be something that happens just at the review points. Okay, so the remediation process, I've said a little bit about this already, but if you've got any doubts at all about a trainee, please make sure you do 2 things. Inform the professional mentor to get them in to help you make a decision as to whether or not that trainee is actually at risk of failure. And please do inform the university straight away. Review 4 is the point that you should be doing this. If you are leaving it any longer than that, then you are in danger of not giving the trainee enough time to make the required process. For the remediation process, the university tutor will come in. They will most likely do a joint observation with either you or the professional mentor, and then make a decision about whether or not they think that that trainee, they agree with you that that trainee is at risk of failure. You then all sit down together with the trainee and have a meeting to discuss 3 targets. And those 3 targets, it shouldn't be reams of targets, it should be 3 very clear targets of the areas of greatest need for improvement. And those are recorded on the remediation paperwork, and then they are agreed with the trainee, so the trainee is very clear about what the targets are. But as well as giving them targets, you need to also help them to understand how they can achieve those. So if, for instance, they are struggling with behaviour management, it's quite often a target when somebody's at risk of failure, then you are providing them with opportunities to go and see good and outstanding practice in that area. You're not just expecting them to improve without having some guidance. It might mean we have to scale back the timetable a little bit just to take the foot off the accelerator and give them a chance to get back up to speed again. So, you know, they've got to be very clear, and your professional mentor will help you with this, and the university tutor will help you with this. So please don't just go ahead and do it, and then the next thing we hear is a trainee comes in and says, I'm in remediation, because we'll just reverse that decision straight away to make sure that it's done correctly. The trainee must have a minimum of 2 weeks to be able to try and meet those targets, and then at the end of 2 weeks there will be a review process to see how they're doing. For some trainees, it all might be fine. They might just have needed that little bit of a pause to get themselves back moving forwards. And for other trainees, it could be that they remain in remediation, but different targets are added or removed depending on, you know, where they're up to with the progress. If a trainee has gone into remediation at some point during the block, then they will most likely get a visit, another visit towards the end of the block by a senior moderator. Unless they've made marvellous, you know, progress and everything's fine, then a senior moderator will come in to discuss whether the trainee has made sufficient progress for you to help you inform your decision about whether they should pass or not. But the final decisions are made collectively at the progress board. I think that's everything, is it? Yeah.
Just a few reminders then, just as we finish, and then you can go to subjects. I have a list of the subjects here as well, which rooms you're in. So if anyone didn't get that, I've got the list that can go on the front desk in a moment. So your jobs are to carry out a weekly observation, a formal observation, to do the weekly mentor meeting with the students, to induct them into your department and help them with resources, create a timetable that's reflecting on the 60%, up to 60%, to engage in joint and supportive planning with the trainees so they can develop their planning, to monitor them against the standards, make sure that trainees work towards good to outstanding progress indicators towards the end of the placement, and to engage with university tutors if they're not at that point. Contribute to their review 5A and B. Contribute to Ofsted grading towards the end of the review process as a whole. Help them with their assignments. Help them with any activities they might have, and to help them with evidence they may need for their record of professional development and their school experience file. Please make sure that you contact us at the university on a regular basis if you need anybody from the university to assist you. We are always here by email or by telephone, and we'll get back to you ASAP when you need to speak to us. And any questions, just ring us straight away and we can get back to you. But most of all, thank you so much for engaging in the process of being a subject mentor. We couldn't have a really good partnership that we have without your support. So thank you for being such excellent people and giving your time up to be subject mentors.